Don't spill my tea, though. There's a lot of electronic devices over here.
Okay.
Okay.
Also, I was 2 years old when I figured out that I liked the show Sophia the First. It's a good show.
Chapter 2. Harper, tell me of the road that leads beyond this hold, that wends its way beyond the hill. Does it go on further until it ends in sunset's gold? Manoli roused briefly, reacting to an inner call that had nothing to do with the sun's rising on this side of Pern. She saw dark night and stars through the window, felt the sleeping fire lizards tucked about her, and gratefully went back to sleep again. She was so tired. Once the sun had cleared the roof of the outer side of the rectangle of buildings that comprised the main Harper Craft Hall, it shone directly at her windows, set in the eastern side of the hall. Gradually, the light penetrated the room, and the unusual combination of light and warmth on her face woke Manoli. She lay, her body not yet responsive, wondering where she was. Remembering, she was uncertain what to do next. Had she missed some general waking call? No, Sylvina had said that she was to sleep herself out. As she pushed back the sleeping furs, she heard the sound of voices chanting. The rhythm was familiar. She smiled, identifying one of the long sagas. Apprentices were being taught the complicated timing by rote, just as she had taught the youngsters in Half Circle Seahold when Paterion was sick, and later after he died. The similarity reassured her. Guys, this chapter is very long. We are probably going to have to stop at a break in the middle. We'll see. Anyway. As she slid from the bed, she clenched her teeth in anticipation of touching the cool, hard stones of the floor. But to her surprise, her feet only felt stiff, not painful this morning. She glanced out the window at the sun. It was well into morning by the cast of shadow. She'd really slept. Then she was laughing at herself, for, to be sure she had. She was halfway round Pern from Bend and Weir and Half Circle Hold, and she had had at least 6 hours more rest than usual. Fortunately, the fire lizards had been as tired as she, or they'd have wakened her with their hunger. She stretched and shook out her hair, then hobbled carefully to the jar and basin. After washing with soap sand, she dressed and brushed her hair, feeling able to face new experiences. Beauty gave an impatient chirp. She was awake, and very hungry. Rocky and Diver echoed the complaint. Manoli would have to find them food, and right soon. Having 9 fire lizards would prejudice enough people against her, without having unmanageably hungry ones who would irritate even the most tolerant of people. Resolutely, Manoli opened the door to a silent hallway. The aromatic odors of claw, baking breads, and meats filled the air. Manoli decided she need only follow the smells to their source to satisfy her friends. On either side of the wide corridor were doors. Those on the outside of the hall were open to let sun and air flood the inside. She descended from the uppermost level into the large entranceway. Don't cut yourself.
It's a butter knife.
Directly in front from the uppermost level into the directly in front of the staircase. I'm not going to read over you singing.
Fine.
Okay. Directly in front of the staircase were dragon-high metal doors with the most curious closings she'd ever seen. On the back of the doors were wheels, which evidently turned the heavy bars into floor and ceiling. At Half Circle Seahold there had been the heavy horizontal bars, but this arrangement would be easier to lock and looked much more secure. To the left was a double-doored entrance into a great hall, probably the room where the Harper had been talking last night. To the right she looked into the dining hall, almost as large as the great hall, with 3 long tables parallel to the windows. Also to her right, by the stairwell, was an open doorway, leading to shallow steps in the kitchen, judging by the appetizing odors and familiar sounds. The fire lizards creeled in hunger, but Manoli couldn't have the whole fare invading the kitchen and upsetting the drudges. She ordered them to perch on the cornices in the shadows above the door. She'd bring them food, she promised, but they had to behave. Beauty scolded until the others settled meekly into place, only their glowing, jeweled-faceted eyes giving evidence of their positions. Then Beauty assumed her favorite perch on Manoli's shoulder, her head half buried in Manoli's thick hair, and her tail wrapped securely about Manoli's throat like a golden necklace. As Manoli reached the kitchen, the scene with the drudges and cooks scurrying about preparing the midday meal fleetingly revived memories of happier days at Half Circle. But here it was Sylvina who noticed her and smiled, as Manoli's mother would not have done. "You're awake? Are you rested?" Sylvina gestured imperatively at a slack-featured, clumsy-looking man by the hearth. "Claw, Camo. Pour a mug of claw for Manoli. You must be famished, child. How are your feet?" "Fine, thank you. And I don't want to bother anyone." "Bother? What bother?" "Camo, pour the claw into the mug." "It's not for myself I'm here." "Well, you need to eat, and you must be famished." "Please, it's my fire lizards. Have you any scraps?" Sylvina's hands flew to her mouth. She glanced about her head as if expecting a swarm of fire lizards. "No, I've told them to wait," Manoli said quickly. "They won't come in here." "Now you are a thoughtful child," Sylvina said in so firm a tone that Manoli wondered why, and then realized that she was the object of a good deal of furtive curiosity. "Camo, here, give me that." Sylvina took the cup from the man, who was walking with exaggerated care not to slop an over-full container. "And get the big blue bowl from the cold room. The big blue bowl, Camo, from the cold room. Bring it to me." Sylvina deftly handed the cup to Manoli without spilling a drop. "The cold room, Camo, and the blue bowl." She turned the man by the shoulders and gave him a gentle shove in the proper direction. "Abuna, you're nearest the hearth. Do dish up some of the cereal. Plenty of sweetening on it, too. The child's nothing but skin and bones." Sylvina smiled at Manoli. "No use feeding the fowl and starving the servant, as it were. I save meat for your friends when we truss up the roast." And Sylvina nodded toward the biggest hearth where great joints of meat were turning on heavy spits, since meat's what the Harper said fire lizards need. "Now, where would be the best place?" Sylvina glanced about her undecidedly, but Manoli had noticed a low door that led up a short flight of steps to the corner of the courtyard. "Would I disturb anyone out there?" "Not at all. You are a considerate child." "That's right, Camo, and thank you." Sylvina patted the man's arm kindly while he beamed with the pleasure of a job properly done and rewarded. Sylvina tipped the edge of the bowl toward Manoli. "Is this enough? There's more." "Oh, that's a gracious plenty, Sylvina." "Camo, this is Manoli. Follow Manoli with the bowl. She can't carry it and her own breakfast. This is Manoli, Camo. Follow Manoli. Go right out, dear. Camo's good at carrying things. At least what doesn't spill." Sylvina turned from her then, speaking sharply to two women chopping roots, bidding them to slice, not stare. Very much aware of scrutiny, Manoli moved awkwardly to the steps, cup in one hand, bowl of warm cereal in the other, and Camo shuffling behind her. Beauty, who had remained discreetly covered by Manoli's hair, now craned her neck about, smelling the raw meat in the bowl Camo carried. "Pretty, pretty," the man mumbled as he noticed the fire lizard. "Pretty small dragon?" He tapped Manoli on the shoulder. "Pretty small dragon?" He was so anxious for her to answer that he almost tripped on the shallow steps. "Yes, she is like a small dragon, and she is pretty," Manoli agreed, smiling. "Her name is Beauty." "Her name is Beauty." Camo was entranced. "Her name is Beauty. She pretty small dragon." He beamed as he loudly declared this information. Manoli shushed him, not wanting either to alarm or distract Sylvina's helpers. She put her mug and bowl and reached for the meat. "Pretty small dragon, Beauty," Camo said, ignoring her as she pulled the bowl so firmly in his huge, thick-fingered hands. "You go to Sylvina, Camo. You go to Sylvina." Camo stood where he was, bobbing his head up and down, his mouth set in a wet, wide grimace of childish delight, too entranced by Beauty to be distracted. Beauty now crilled imperiously, and Manoli grabbed a handful of meat to quiet her. But her cries had alerted the others. They came, some of them from the open windows of the dining hall above Manoli's head, others, judging by the shrieks of dismay, through the kitchen and out the door by the steps. "Pretty! Pretty! Oh, pretty!" Camo exclaimed, turning his head from side to side, trying to see all the flitting fire lizards at once. He didn't move a muscle as Auntie 1 and 2 perched on his forearms, snatching gobbets of meat directly from the bowl. Uncle secured his talons to the fabric of Camo's tunic, his right wingtip jabbing the man in the neck and chin as the littlest fire lizard fought for his fair share of the meat. Brownie, Mimic, and Lazybones ranged from Camo's shoulders to Manoli's as she tried to distribute the meat evenly. Alternating between embarrassment at her friend's bad manners and gratitude for Camo's stolid assistance, Manoli was acutely aware that all activity had ceased in the kitchen to watch the spectacle. Momentarily, she expected to hear an irate Sylvina order Camo back to his ordinary duties, but all she heard was the buzz of whispered gossiping. "How many does she have?" she heard one clear whisper out of the general mumble. "9, Sylvina answered imperturbably. "When the two the Harper was given have hatched, the Harper Hall will have 11. Sylvina sounded smugly superior. The buzz increased in volume. "That bread's risen enough now, Abuna. You and Kayla shape it." The fire lizards had cleared the bowl of meat, and Camo stared into it hollow, his face contorted by an expression of dismay. "All gone? Pretty's hungry?" "No, Camo, they've had more than enough. They're not hungry any more. In fact, their bellies were distended, they gorged so. You go to Sylvina. Sylvina wants you, Camo." And Manoli followed Sylvina's example. She took him by the shoulders, turned him down the steps, and gave him a gentle shove. Manoli sipped the good hot claw, beginning to think that Sylvina's marked attentions and kindness were deliberate. Or was that foolish? Sylvina was just a kind, thoughtful person. Look how she treated slow Camo. She was patience itself with his inadequacy. Nonetheless, do you guys think Camo is inadequate?
I don't even know what that means. I don't either.
Inadequate means you're not adequate.
What
means
does adequate?
You're not. Adequate means you're good enough. So inadequate would mean not good enough.
No.
No. Camo's just slow, but he does his job, doesn't he?
Yeah.
That is not a nice way to describe him. I'm going to change some of the words that are used to describe Camo from here on out because I like Camo. You guys are going to like him too as I keep reading this book. I don't think Camo is inadequate. He's just a little slow.
Camo's a great character.
Camo's great! And he likes the fire lizards.
Great Camo, great Camo.
Nonetheless, Sylvina was obviously the head woman at the Harpercraft Hall, and like Serene Minora at Bend and Weir, undoubtedly wielded a good deal of authority. If Sylvina was friendly, others would follow her lead. Manoli began to relax in the warm sun. Her dreams last night had been troubled, though she couldn't remember details now in the bright morning. Only a sense of uneasiness and helplessness. Sylvina had done much to dissipate the lingering misgivings. Nothing to fear from Harper's, Tagalan had repeatedly told her. Across the courtyard, young voices broke into a lusty rendition of the saga previously chanted. The fire lizards rose at the eruption of sound, settling again as Manoli languidly reassured them. Then a pure, sweet trill from Beauty soared in a delicate descant above the apprentices' male voices. Rocky and Diver joined her, wings half spread as they expanded their lungs for breath. Mimic and Brownie dropped from the window ledge to add their voices. Lazy would not put himself to any such effort, and the two aunties and Blue Uncle were at best indifferent singers, but they listened, heads cocked, jeweled eyes whirling. The 5 singers rose to their haunches now, their throats thickening, their cheeks swelling as their jaws relaxed to admit the sweet, pure notes. Their eyes were half-lidded as they concentrated, as good singers will, to produce the fluting descant. They were happy then, Manoli thought with relief, and picked up the melody of the saga. Not that the fire lizards needed her voice, with their apprentices supplying the tune and harmony. They were on the last 2 measures of the chorus when Manoli suddenly realized that it was only herself and the fire lizards singing, that the male voices had ceased. Startled, she looked up and saw that almost every window about the courtyard was filled with faces. The exceptions were the windows from the hall from which the voices had come. "Who has been singing?" demanded an irate tenor, and a man's head appeared at one of the empty windows. "Why, that's a grand way to wake up, Brutigan," said the clear baritone of the Master Harper from some point above Manoli and to her left. Craning her head up, she saw him leaning out of his windows on the upper story. "Good morning to you, Master Harper," said Brutigan courteously, but his tone indicated that he was disgruntled by the intervention. Manoli tried to sit small, heartily wishing herself between. She was certainly frozen motionless. "I didn't know your fire lizards could sing," Sylvina said, appearing on Manoli's right and absently retrieving mug and bowl from the steps. "A nice compliment to your chorus, eh, Brutigan?" she added, raising her voice to carry across the courtyard. You'd be wanting your claw now, Robinson? It would be welcome, Sylvina. What?
Arrow.
Fantastic. He stretched, leaning further out to peer down at Manoli. Enter a fair of fire lizards singing. A lovely way to be awakened, Manoli, and a good morning to you, too. Before Manoli could respond, a look of dismay crossed his face. My fire lizard! My egg! And he disappeared from sight. Sylvina chuckled and she regarded Manoli. He'll be of no use to anyone until it's hatched and he's got one of his own. At that point, Brudigan's singers renewed their song. Beauty chirped questioningly at Manoli. No, Beauty. No more singing, not now. They need the practice, and Sylvina gestured at the hall. Now I've the harbor's meal to see to, and you to settle. She paused, glancing about at the fire lizards. But what to do with them? They'll usually sleep when they're as full as they are right now. All to the good, but where? Mercy! Manoli tried not to laugh at Sylvina's astonishment, because all but Beauty, who took her usual perch on Manoli's shoulder, had disappeared. Manoli pointed to the roof opposite and the small bodies landing there, apparently out of thin air. They do go between, don't they? Sylvina said more than asked. Harper says they're much like dragons? That was the question. I don't know that... Excuse you.
What?
I don't know that much about dragons, but fire lizards can go between. They followed me last night from Bend and Weir. And they're obedient. I could wish the apprentices were half so willing. Then Sylvina motioned Manoli to follow her back into the kitchen. Camo, turn the spit. Camo, now turn the spit. I suppose the rest of you have been watching the yard instead of the food, she said, scowling indiscriminately about the kitchen. The cooks and drudges alike pretended industry, clanging, banging, splashing, or bending with assiduous care over quieter tasks of paring and scraping. Better yet, Manoli, you take the Harper his claw, and check that egg of his. He'll be roaring for you soon enough, so we might as well anticipate. Then I shall want Master Oldife to see your feet. Not that Minora hasn't all but healed them anyway, and... Sylvina caught Manoli's left hand and scowled at the red mark. Wherever did you get such a fierce wound? And who bungled the healing of it? There now, can you grip with that hand? Sylvina had been assembling on a small tray the various items of the Harper's breakfast, the last of which was a heavy pot of claw. She gave the tray to Manoli. There now, his room is the second door on the right from yours, Manoli. Turn the spit, Camo, don't just hold on to it. Manoli's fire lizards are fed and sleeping. You'll have another gawk at them later. Turn the spit now. As briskly as Manoli could move on her stiff feet, she made her way out of the kitchen and up the broad steps to the second level. Beauty hummed softly in her ear, a gently disobedient descant to the saga that Brudigan's pupils were singing lustily. Master Robinson had... What are you doing?
I don't know.
Eat it, honey. Use your mouth. Master Robinson hadn't sounded annoyed about the fire lizard singing, Manoli thought. She'd apologized to Journeyman Brudigan when she got the chance. She simply hadn't realized she'd caused a distraction. She'd been so pleased that her friends were relaxed enough to want to sing. Second door on her right. Manoli tapped, then rapped, then knocked, hard enough to make her knuckles sting. Come, and Sylvina. Oh, Manoli, you're just the person I wanted to see, the Harper said, throwing open the door. And good morning to you, proud beauty, he added, grinning at the little queen, who chirped in acknowledgment as he took the tray from Manoli. Sylvina's forever anticipating me. Would you please check my egg? It's in the other room by the hearth. It feels harder to me. He sounded anxious as he pointed to the farther door. Manoli obediently entered the room, and he walked with her, setting the tray down as he passed the sand table by the window and pouring himself a mug of claw before he joined her by the hearth in the next room, where a small fire burned gently. The earthen pot had been set at the edge of the hearth apron. Manoli opened it, carefully brushing aside the warm sand that covered the precious fire lizard egg. It was harder, but not much more so than when she'd given it to the Master Harper at Bend and Weir the previous evening. It's fine, Master Robinson, just fine. And the pot is warm enough, too, she said, running her hands down the side. She replaced the sand and the top and rose. When we brought the clutch back to Bend and Weir 2 days ago, Weirwoman Lessa said it would take a 7-day for them to hatch, so we've 5 days more. The Harper sighed with exaggerated relief. You slept well, Manoli? You're rested? Awake long? Long enough. The harper burst out laughing, and she realized how much chagrin she'd put into her tone. Long enough to set a few people by the ears, huh? My dear child, did you not notice the difference in the chorus the second time? Your fire lizards have challenged them. Brudigan was only gruff with surprise. Tell me, can your fire lizards improvise descants to any tune? I don't really know, Master Robinson. Still not sure, are you, young Manoli? He didn't mean the fire lizard's abilities. There was such kindness in his voice and eyes that Manoli felt unexpected tears behind her eyes. I don't want to be a nuisance. Allow me to differ, both to statement and content, Manoli. Then he sighed. You're over young to appreciate the value of nuisance, although the improvement in that chorus is a point in my argument. However, it's much too early in the morning for me to expound philosophy. He guided her back into the other room, quite the most cluttered place she had ever seen, and in direct contrast to the neatness of his bedchamber. While musical instruments were carefully stored on hook and shelf in cases, piles of record skins, drawings, slates, wax and stone littered every surface and were heaped in corners and against the walls of the room. On one wall was a finely drawn map of the Pern continent, with smaller detailed drawings of all the major holds and craft halls pinned here and there on the borders. The long sand table by the window was covered with musical notations, some of them carefully shielded by glass to prevent erasure. The harper had set the tray on the center island, which separated the sand table into two halves. Now he pulled a square of wood to protect the sand and positioned the tray so he could eat comfortably. He smeared a thick slice of bread with soft cheese and picked up his spoon to eat his cereal, motioning with the spoon for Manoli to seat herself on a stool. We're in a period of change and readjustment, Manoli, he said, managing to speak and eat simultaneously without choking on food or gargling his words.
That?
Who knows? I can barely speak with my mouth empty.
He is a magician.
And you are likely to be a vital part of that change. Yesterday, I exerted an unfair pressure on you to join the Harper Hall. Oh, yes, I did. But you belong here. His forefinger stabbed downward at the floor and then waggled out at the courtyard. First, and he paused to swallow Claw, washing down bread and cereal, we must discover just how well Paterian taught you the fundamentals of our craft and what you need to further your gifts. And, he pointed now to her left hand, what can be done to correct that scar damage. I'd still like to hear you play the song you wrote. His eyes fell to her hands in her lap so that she was aware of her absent-minded kneading of her left palm. Master Oldive will set that to right if anyone can. Sylvina said I was to see him today. We'll have you playing again, more than just those pipes. We need you. When you can craft songs like those Paterian sent me and the ones Elgian found stuck away at the back of the harper shells in the half circle, yes, and that's a matter I'd better explain. He went on, smoothing the hair at the back of his neck, and to Manoli's amazement appearing to be embarrassed. Explain? Yes, well, you hadn't obviously finished writing that song about the Fire Lizard Queen. No, I hadn't actually. Manoli felt that she was not hearing his words properly. For one thing, why did the Master Harper have to explain anything to her? And she'd only jotted down the little tune about the Fire Lizard. Yet last night, now she remembered it, that he'd mentioned the song as if all the Harpers knew about it. You mean Harper Elgian sent it to you? How else would I have got it? We couldn't find you! Robinson sounded annoyed.
Mom, I'm stealing your sweater. I'm cold.
That's fine. When I think of you living in a cave with a damaged hand and you hadn't been allowed to finish that charming song. So I did. He got up, rummaged among the piles of wax slates under the window, extracted one and handed it to her. She looked at the notations obediently, but although they were familiar, she couldn't make her mind read the melody. I had to have something about fire lizards, since I believe they're going to be far more important than anyone has yet to realize. And this tune, his finger tapped the hard wax surface approvingly, was so exactly what I needed, that I just brushed up the harmonics and compressed the lyric story. Probably what you'd have done yourself if you had the chance to work on it again. I couldn't really improve on the melodic line without destroying the integral charm of... What's the matter, Manoli? Manoli realized that she'd been staring at him, unable to believe that he was praising a silly tune she'd only scrawled down. Guiltily, she examined the slate again. I never did get a chance to play it. I wasn't supposed to play my own tunes in the Sea-Hold. I promised my father I wouldn't, so, you see... Manoli. Startled, she looked up at his stern tone. I want you to promise me, and you're now my apprentice. I want you... Can you please stop it?
What?
Please stop. I want you to promise me to write down any tune that comes into your mind. I want you to play it as often as necessary to get it right. Do you understand me? That's why I brought you here. He tapped the slate again. That was a good song before I tampered with it. I need good songs badly. What I said about change affects the Harper Hall more than any other craft, Manoli, because we are the ones who affect change. Just as we teach with our songs, so we also help people accept new ideas and necessary changes. And for that, we need a special kind of harpering. Now, I still have to consider craft principles and standards, especially in your unusual situation. The conventional procedure must be observed. Once we've dispensed with the formalities, we can proceed with your training as fast as you want to go. But this is where you belong, Manoli. You and your singing fire lizards. Bless me, but that was lovely to hear this morning. Ah, Sylvina, good morning. And to you as well, Master Oldive. Manoli, we're going to stop there. So we're going to stop at, and to you as well, Master Oldive. And then we'll take up Master Oldive next time.
I think I either have a bruise or a bug bite